It's time for the first burning platform of the year, 2023. Is it going to be a quiet, calm, a serene year where nothing happens? We should be so lucky. There's no chance of that already. A couple of days into the new year, and there's plenty of stuff that is already burning the platform. Joining us this morning, Pumi Mashiko, and I'm pleased to see Kanthan Pillay. Yeah, look at your earrings. There they are. Very nice, Pumi. Very, very nice. Kanthan, good to see you. Happy New Year. We haven't seen each other yet this year, and I'm hoping it's going to be a good year.
I think it's going to be a pretty good year. My year started terribly because I lost my dog on New Year's Day.
Oh, no.
And that was like, it's probably made it the worst New Year ever because, well, you know what it's like when we love our animals, Gareth.
When you say you lost your dog, you mean your dog died?
Yeah, he just suddenly took ill the night before and just kind of breathed his last on New Year's Day. So it was fairly hectic. So I figured it can't possibly get worse after that. So yeah, I think it's going to be a great year.
Luckily for you, the ANC had more conference after that, so it did get worse. But
yeah, but there was nothing there that was unexpected. We knew that nothing would come out of it, and nothing came out of it. So expectations were met. Pumi?
Right.
I've been counting the days because now that Cyril has won, I've been waiting to see the resignation letter of Lindiwe Sisulu. Because remember, she had a whole interview talking about how it would be difficult for her to serve under Cyril.
Well, cabinet reshuffle is loading in a relatively short space of time.
Well, before we go
we live in hope.
Before we go further, yes, Karen.
Before we go further down this road, because we have someone who is actually a lot closer to the action than us. He was in the Free State, and he's someone who we always love to hear from. And Happy New Year to you too. Leeto, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm good in yourself, guys. Happy New Year to you guys too.
You look angelic. A white shirt against a white background.
I was just thinking exactly that. It's like one of those representations of God that you get in.
No, the big problem is, remember, I moved to a new place, so this wall is either very dark or very light. So I don't know.
Well, it looks good. All we need is the voice. All we need is the voice of Morgan Freeman, and we'll start thinking that you are God. Very good.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot to talk about, guys. But let's let Leeto start because you were in the zone near the action, or at least you know a little bit more about it because you've been paying much more careful attention than maybe the rest of us have. So just starting the year, how's your hometown? How's your home province?
The home province is trash as usual, but I think it was good that everyone else got to see it, and I think it was very good to see the faces of the ANC members as they went through the various towns. Because remember, they didn't just go to Bloemfontein, right? They had to go to Kroonstad, where one of the leaders lived, and so as they went through these different parts, at one point, Fikile Mbalula just said, like, "Where are the roads?" He literally just said that. So, and he's the minister, so. It was very good to see how they sort of got to manage this disappointment of a province. But then I actually did go to Bloemfontein. I went to Bloemfontein for like 3 or 4 days to go and see what it was like. And it was truly humbling to see ANC members truly afraid that the ANC is coming to an end. I didn't think they noticed. It's like, you know, when people are in a sinking ship and sort of like merrily singing along. But they actually noticed that the ANC is going down in flames. And it was very, very scary to see them also acknowledging that, okay, something is really, really wrong. But I also think the scariest part was they would ask analysts and media members to ask senior leadership certain questions. So they're afraid to ask questions. The party's falling apart. And they expect the media to be the people who then try to hold the leadership accountable. I think that was telling, but also very, very scary, because the whole idea of a political party is that we come together, share ideas, ask each other questions, and hold each other accountable. And now that fiber is slowly falling apart, it was scary.
Hmm.
When you say you could see them kind of see the writing on the wall, I'm interested to know what the mood around, because in the past what you see around January 8th is you actually see the huge party that it is. They all roll into town, they're at the Cubanas or whatever the current big like hangout place is. They're stocking out the liquor stores. It's a huge party. Was this a huge party?
Not even the slightest. So there was no big ANC that you used to see. Um, Actually, the rule was there's actually a WhatsApp text going around that shows they had instructed every senior manager in a municipality to at least take of their salary money to hire out at least one taxi to take ANC members there.
Wow.
So you go and you look at the Peter Mokaba lecture that was given by Fikile Mbalula. You would think that's a hall full of youth. It's actually a hall full of municipal employees from just different places in the Free State. There was no young people from Botshabelo actually walking towards the ANC. And I think that's the scary part, right? There were no people going, oh, the ANC is here, let's go. Everybody was just like, oh, the ANC is here, whatever, man, we don't care. And
Sure.
the hangout places with the slay queens were always half full. There was no huge party. It was like attending a funeral. It was the saddest thing you've ever seen. They couldn't even fill up the Cesar Ramabodu Stadium. The Cesar Ramabodu Stadium is not even a third as big as FNB. It's a small
Yes.
stadium in
Yeah,
consideration,
I
and
saw that.
they couldn't even fill Cesar Ramabodu Stadium with the
Hmm.
municipal employees that they hired to come to their event. And so the ANC now where I saw the big problem, right? I was asking the whole time, wait, where are the red shirts? Where's the SACP? And everyone
Hmm.
said, oh no, the SACP is the new craze in town. Their membership has gone up by a factor of 1,000. And now they don't want to ruffle the feathers of the ANC to show them their bigger membership. And so they decided to just come in the ANC regalia or not at all. And so the biggest party in the tripartite alliance now is actually the SACP. But they are at pains to not shake the boat by showing the dying guy they're healthy and dancing.
That's interesting. Did you know any of this? That's fascinating. That's kind of insight that you need to actually have been there to have seen.
No, but even the general members are just saying it, right? The next move is SACP. And the big problem right now is that the SACP had posited itself as this brain trust of the ANC.
Yes.
And I think that's what kept it insulated from this death spiral we're seeing from the ANC, because they knew they had to twerk somewhere else. So they had to come elect, but also come up with policies that would make them look good in the eyes of the other two parties in the tripartite alliance as the brain trust. And so it kept them alive, firstly, on the voting basis, but on secondly, it kept them alive as a brain trust, this idea factory. And so you can't just come and join the SACP and sing really well and we'll clap hands for you. You have to come join the SACP and bring some sort of idea with you, right? Have a policy position and know how to defend that policy position mentally. And so that's what's helped it stay stable, but also grow its base, especially with the ANC members who do believe in the ANC's vision. They now see that their refuge is the SACP, whereas in the ANC right now, the opposite is happening. They are suffering the death spiral that was suffered by SASCO, the Women's League, the Youth League. So the problem is this. Once the ANC or a big political party comes together only for elections, so throughout those 5 or 6 days, all you can do is to elect a leadership, it means that the death spiral has started inside the ANC. So it means they adopted no ideas, no policies, nothing.
Mhm.
All they did is to say, either I'm Cyril or I'm not Cyril, right?
Mhm.
And so
Well,
when you do
according to
that,
Mamoloko Dubai, according to
exactly,
Mamoloko Dubai, they did adopt some policies. One of which is to do with changing the constitution of the um, Reserve Bank.
please, we must stop listening to people like Mamloko Kubai. That's it. Did she have pom poms out when she was saying that? Because she's just a cheerleader, right? In the ANC, she's not serious. So, but then what happens is, so what you saw with SASCO, what you saw with the Youth League, what you saw with all these people, they attach too much power to the vote. And then what then creates the fall apart factor is the fact that you voted for somebody who has no clear mandate. Because when they came together in Bloemfontein with the video cast and everything, they didn't correct. So where are the people who were sent to Nazareth to vote? If now we had enough people to vote you in, but you don't have enough people to just raise their hands and adopt things that you talked about in Nazareth. See, that's the big part. And so that's the scary part, to show you that the ANC is now in its final descent. There's no coming back from this. Even Gwede acknowledged. Gwede was like, oh no, all we need is Cyril, because if we lose Cyril now, we lose about 15% of our voters and we're going to lose our majority. So Gwede was there just like, I'm just trying to eat. The last crumbs here, I'm collecting and I'm leaving.
So any comments on this? Because I do want to bring JJ in. He's got some interesting stuff that we really wouldn't get from anywhere else, just like with Leeto, we wouldn't get from anywhere else. But any comments on this before we move to the other stuff? And stick around, Leeto.
Gareth, I think we need to shift our perspective on this entire ANC thing. And everything that Leeto said so far has been absolutely spot on in terms of what's been happening within the ANC. But we actually need to pull back a bit and just take a look at what's happening overall. And the interesting thing for me that's emerged basically since December and now going forward to 111 or whatever it was that they've called it, we need to recognize that for the first time, we have a president of the country and of the African National Congress who is actually divorced from all of the factions within the African National Congress. So just take a view that right now Cyril is sitting in a position where he's accountable to no one within his party. Why is that? It's because he's got access to the funding to actually keep everyone in check. He's got the media on his side as well. And right now you've got a sitting president of the country taking the National Prosecuting Authority to court to prevent the NPA from proceeding with charges against him. So this guy is pretty much unassailable right now in terms of where he is sitting. Just consider all of the stuff that's currently not working. Okay, we've got power blackouts at a worse level than it ever was during the Zuma time. We have violence in the streets that's at a higher level. By every single measure, we were better off under Zuma in terms of the economy than we are currently under Cyril. Do you hear even so much as a peep from the mainstream media talking about any of these things? No. Because this guy is... So really the view that we need to be taking right now is that the ANC's role in this is kind of irrelevant. And in the absence of a coherent opposition that's actually able to speak a narrative that's going to pull people on board, we're pretty much going to be stuck with this in 2024 as well. And I think that, so the time has now come. We need to step back from the ANC's internal machinations, which no longer matter, is my point. We are going to see a cabinet reshuffle coming up very soon. I'm pretty sure that Mabuza will be recalled and Paul is now going to become deputy president of the country. We've already seen a massive consolidation of power in the hands of Gwede. And I've got to tell you, I don't think that's... necessarily a bad thing. So we're actually seeing a shift back to a lot of stuff that happened during the... I'll get to that in a second, Pumi. But we're seeing a shift back to a lot of things that were actually taken apart post the Mbeki era. So public enterprises is effectively being disbanded because you've got responsibility for Eskom now moving to minerals and energy. You're now seeing a scenario where Transnet gets moved back into the Department of Transport. So you're seeing a dismembering of the power structures that existed under public enterprises. SAA had already been taken out a while back. Gwede has been right in terms of the fact that we need to be making use of our coal resources, because in order for us to kickstart economic growth right now, we absolutely need to have energy.
Yes.
And we spoke about this this last year. So there are all of these things that are going to be happening, but they are divorced from any democratic process. So it's essentially Cyril dictating a course of events that's going to be going forward. I don't see right now any narrative that is being spoken on the part of the opposition that's going to see a coming together. And, interestingly enough, you now see Rob Hersov and Gwede Mantashe singing from the same hymn sheet. So park that for a second and just consider what's actually going on behind the scenes. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about the ANC, Pumi. You might have a different take around what's going on. But, right now, I just wish that the DA would get their act together, stop talking about stuff that's actually irrelevant, and actually focus on delivery and focus on getting people to unite around that stuff. Frankly, they should not be talking about what's going on in Zimbabwe. They should not be talking about what's going on in Ukraine. They should not be worried about the fact that we have Russian vessels that are pitching up at Simonstown.
Yeah.
Really?
Well,
because people don't care.
Well, we are interested in what's going on there. And luckily for us, we've got JJ Cornish here to help us figure that out. And he's going to give us a brief intro to 2023. JJ, it's good to see you. Happy New Year to you too, sir. And you have some clangers to drop on us before we get too comfortable with the new year, right?
Well, bonne to all of you, and good to see that
and bonjour, Jean-Jacques.
Bonjour, and good to have such an insight into our ruling party, accountable to the ruling party and not to the people. And that's one of the things. Very, very depressing to hear, but very well put.
So, JJ, what is the story that we see about Zimbabwe's record wheat harvest? Is this going to help us? What's this all about?
Well, Zimbabwe, the cliche for aging journalists like myself was Zimbabwe, once the bread basket of the region, now the basket case of the continent. Well, here we have, they've turned it on their heads. And they did have rain this year, or some good rains this year, which they hadn't had the previous year, but essentially good farming. And they have a 50-year record wheat harvest. That's 375,000 tons. They're completely self-sufficient in wheat. And when you see Ukraine and Russia unable really to export the kind of numbers that are required because of the invasion by Russia, it's a very, very important time to have it. The thing about Zimbabwe, of course, is always hassles. How are they paying the farmers? They're not doing that properly and on time. They also have a much bigger corn harvest, maize, but that's, of course, a staple. It's still not enough. They're still having to import some maize. But, most of the maize from South Africa was going to Zimbabwe, some less of it now. And there was wheat being imported to Zimbabwe. That's not going. So this is a good news story out of Zimbabwe, no doubt about it. The thing is, of course, Zimbabwe being Zimbabwe, some Zimbabweans still need food aid, just simply to survive. But being self-sufficient in wheat at this very important time, great news for Zimbabwe.
Well, that is great news. Just giving us a brief overview, what are the other big things that we need to be looking at in Africa this year? Because, often and mostly when Kanthan is on, and our audience is grateful for this, when Kanthan's on, we tend to sort of look a little further afield. But we very seldom pay as much attention as we perhaps should to what's actually happening just north of us in this very, very complex continent of ours. And of course, Africa itself is, divided. What did Julius Caesar say when he went into Gaul? Gallia est divisi divi in partes tres, which means like it's divided into three. And Africa is divided into way more parts than three. So there's always stuff going on. What are you going to be looking at this year?
Well, I mean, the economy, the African economy always grew faster than those around the world. That's not the case. The World Health Organization, World Monetary Organization is saying today they're one step away, some of the countries, one step away from another big shock before they go and are unable to pay their debts. during the easy money years, they were borrowing like mad, and now they're having to repay. So that's a big thing. The growth has been downgraded from 2 to about, well, just less than 1%. So there's economic tough times coming, very, very tough times coming, and not the least for us, but countries like Nigeria and others. So it's the economic growth problem that we're looking at this year that's going to hit us. There are small minor stories coming in. The Somaliland, the country I speak about a great deal, the break-off from Somalia, post-colonial break-off, which African countries don't seem to realize or haven't yet realized. They should be recognizing it's a real democracy. They've actually now, Gareth, found oil there. Now, some people's eyes roll, the black curse. Others say fantastic. I wonder what that's going to mean. Does that mean countries that didn't recognize it suddenly are going to? They were digging a water well, and this black liquid poured out is rather like something out of Hollywood, and it's oil. So they found it in this Marodi J region, and we don't know what's going to. They've given to Britain, a British company, the right to explore further and to exploit some of it. So it's very interesting to see. Britain is the country, I've been there many, many times, and they've always had British government servants there. Britain hasn't recognized it, but they have been very supportive. So they'll get to benefit from that to some extent. But we see other things like the Rwanda DRC situation is getting worse and worse, and that is very bad for the country at the heart of our continent, the DRC. Paul Kagame now behaving like the old National Party, like the old apartheid bosses, talking in Kinyarwanda to his people, suddenly breaks into English, reminiscent of the times I can remember when John Foster said, "We have done away with our 90-day detention with our trial facility. And we have done that because we are bringing in 180 days detention without trial." And there was laughter around the house. Well, here we have Paul Kagame saying, we're not going to accept Congolese refugees anymore. Now, Congolese refugees constitute about 60% of those in Rwanda. He says, they are not my problem. Well, I suppose his problem are the refugees that the Brits are going to foist on Rwanda, yes, because that comes with a healthy £120 million payment. Ka-ching, this suddenly becomes my problem. But well, it's so cynical on his part. And he's saying that he might have to repatriate some of the Congolese refugees. Well, that's simply because they're being told by Britain, by the EU, by the African Union, by the United Nations, stop supporting the Tutsi rebels, the M23 rebels inside the Congo. And that's really seriously pissed him off. And that's why he's taken this move. But, it's... I come back to the story that it will be the economy I'm looking at, and that Africa's being told, stop relying on foreign purchases, transform your economy to look more to agriculture, as Zimbabwe has done, and industrialization, and look to yourselves, and that's the only way you're going to grow out of this problem.
Well, let me ask
other story.
Gareth, I just want to climb in for a second. Jean-Jacques, you were talking about Rwanda, and something else, and you're quite right in terms of their interference in the Eastern DRC and the support for the rebels out there. But I just wanted to ask whether you had any info on what's going on in terms of Mozambique, because Rwanda has got troops up there. We've got troops up there, effectively fighting the jihadists in the northeastern corner of Mozambique. I saw a video that was doing the rounds. Yeah, very disturbing video of what's going on there? Just talk to that.
And the SANDF actually did put out a statement.
Yes, well, they said that they're investigating it.
They will be investigating what is the video and its origins and what exactly is happening over there. but also essentially saying we're actually not in charge. It's the Mozambican military.
Sure, but
that,
at the same
that
time,
tells our guys what to do
if
over
our
there.
troops in uniform are throwing bodies onto
Open fires.
open fires, like what's going on there?
Well, I haven't seen our troops doing that. The thing about it is when you have a peacekeeping operation like you do up in Cabinda, things get very ugly and get very ugly very quickly. I haven't seen our troops being responsible. And I know that the Mozambicans have overreacted massively. This is an absolutely shocking video. It goes back to, the very worst we've seen in Africa. Rwanda's there, and for one moment it appeared like they were sort of holding the ring, but I don't know how long they're going to last there now. In the light of this, Rwanda did that because they wanted to ingratiate themselves certainly with the European powers, because EU is supposed to be training peacekeepers up there. I haven't seen the effect of that, unless, if you want to make a cynical remark about the EU teaching them barbecue techniques or something. But the fact is, very, very ugly atrocities actually filmed. And that's another thing, is you can't escape these things today with the technology we have. Anything you do like that will be filmed and will get out. So I wait to get an assurance from the SANDF that they're not personally responsible, but it's very, very bad what we've seen.
One of the other things, talking about looking at the economies and what Africa does this, with this coming year, as we have a looming global recession, they tell us, is the election race in Nigeria, also one of the more sophisticated economies on the continent. What's your take on that heating up race?
Well, it's one of 24 elections we have this year. 10 of them would be presidential elections, probably the most important of them. Nigeria has not disappointed us with the elections that they've held. They've had actually changes of party governments, and so we have every hope that they're going to do this properly. But they have the biggest task on the continent. The biggest election I've observed is in the DRC, which was the most expensive that the United Nations has ever sponsored. But so I have every faith in the Nigerians actually having proper elections. But they do have, of course, up in the northeast, the Boko Haram area, and they won't be able to poll in every one of the areas. But I do have faith that they will be able to have a proper election. Who's going to come through? I don't know. I hate making predictions beforehand, because all I have left is my credibility. So I hate people to point out to me later, well, you said.
AJ,
but,
I'm going to, I'll let you go in a second, because we've got so much to squeeze in this morning that I don't want to run out of runway for Kanthan and Leeto and Pumi. But I do want to say that I'm interviewing a guy called LJ Fenter, who's a tremendous writer. You must be very aware of him. And he's got a bit of an exclusive for us on what's happening in the Central African Republic, which he'll be telling me about later. It has to do with the Russians, and it is not a story that we can ignore. So I'll be sure to let you know once that's ready. And we'd love to hear your comments on that too.
Okay. The thing about the Russians is that we had in the Security Council, or in consultations, the United States turning on Russia, saying you're interfering in Africa with these mercenaries, and they have not brought peace in Burkina Faso or stopped the jihadis in that country, and certainly not in Mali. So the Russian influence is growing, but the effectiveness and what the countries have sacrificed in order to get the Russians in there hasn't paid off. So they're losing peacekeepers from Germany, from the European Union, from France particularly. We had the French deputy foreign minister in Burkina Faso, where they've just tried to kick the ambassador out, saying we're not interfering, we're wanting to help. But the Burkinabe are saying, get out of here. And they've actually attacked French diplomatic buildings. They've turned it all upside down, but there hasn't been the effect that the African countries wanted. I'd be very interested to hear what's happening in Central African Republic. So what time is that coming on? I'm going to have to pick it up.
It's going to be a sort of long form. I'm recording it. He's in the UK at the moment, but we're going to be putting that together this afternoon, and then it'll probably be ready early next week. I'll let you know once it's done.
Well, tell him to wear his thermal underwear. Huh?
Yeah, it's not exactly warm. Thank you, JJ. Great to catch up with you, and thank you for your participation this morning.
All the best to all of you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so there's no shortage of stuff going on here as well. Kanthan, we had an email. I know it was a voice note that someone said. Bitleng sent it to us yesterday, and I tried to give the brief on Kevin McCarthy and the Republican Party and what's going on there. But I mean, U.S. politics, the forecast for 2023. I mean, have we got anything to look forward to there? Because what do we even make of the ongoing Russian-Ukraine conflict? To not mention the story that seems to still be at the top of most newspapers' priority lists.
Well, let's just get Kevin McCarthy out of the way first. You might remember the last show of last year when we touched on U.S. politics. Mm-hmm. I said at the time, the real battle that's going down here is not between the U.S., between the Democrats and the Republicans. It's between the Trump Republicans and what Trump refers to as rhinos, Republicans in name only. And the entire conflict, the reason why the election of Kevin McCarthy took as long as it did is because of the internal wrangling that was going on within the Republicans in terms of who gets to do what. Now, there's a couple of things that the Democrats did over the past term that they were in control under Pelosi. The one is that they didn't allow any debate to be introduced from the floor. They didn't allow any legislation to be introduced from the floor. So they effectively stopped the Parliament of the United States of America, which is what the House is, from actually doing their job. The second thing is that they spent a lot of time investigating Trump at various levels and didn't allow anything to be tabled on other matters of national importance. And remember, at the same time, there was all of that debate around Roe versus Wade ahead of the Supreme Court. There were private members across both sides who wanted to codify Roe versus Wade, which means that it would have pulled the rug out from under the Supreme Court. And essentially, you had the Democrats not wanting that stuff to be done. All of the arguments that have been taking place behind the scene right now has been effectively to give all of the Trump Republicans control of a couple of processes. So they say to Kevin McCarthy, you're going to be speaker, all right? You're effectively third in line for the presidency. But what we want is we're going to actually be driving the select committees. We are going to be instituting inquiries of our own. So one of the things that they've immediately tabled is they want Janet Yellen to now start investigating all funds that have been transferred in and out of the country by Hunter Biden and by Joe Biden's brother. In other words, they're launching a major investigation into the financial dealings of Joe Biden's immediate family. And it's very possible that shortly before we get to the next elections, you're going to have them deciding to actually try to impeach Biden. And so everything that's behind the scenes was on the basis of the Trump Republicans wanting to get control of those processes. And so it obviously took a lot of argument behind the scenes. Remember that Kevin McCarthy differs from Trump on a number of platforms. I mean, the guy literally has a Ukrainian flag on his profile. Whereas Trump is always of the view that the U.S. shouldn't be fighting in Ukraine. They need to get the hell out of there. And but that's the McCarthy story. He'll sit there quietly now because he got what he wanted, which is the position, and the Trump Republicans are going to be ascended behind the scene.
We've got such a list of points to get to. Pums, you've got a couple of things you want to talk about this morning too, and I know Leeto wants to talk about, are we using this one resource that we don't seem to be able to put to good use, and that is our young population advantageously. We'll get to that in a second. But what do you make of, first of all, JJ's summation of some of the stories here on this continent, but also what Kanthan's just said about US politics?
You know what has been fascinating to watch with the Kevin McCarthy debates is very similar to what we've been watching here with the ANC, right? All of this internal wrangling and using all of this resource of the Senate, of the Parliament, to fight personal battles, right? So what is not being talked about in all of that, what's not being talked about, I think that actually very fundamentally affect the people, the economy, the delivery, so this is, and it's been, for me, just watching, even as all of the news agency are talking about how, for the first time in 150 years, we've had like 20, how many did they eventually end up, how many rounds of counting did they, voting did they eventually get to, and all because of personal politics around Hunter Biden, Russia, and the money. And
no, but
all,
Pumi, you're doing a disservice by saying it's personal, because remember that what they are trying to do, and I'm talking now very specifically in terms of the Trump Republicans, is they're actually trying to get to a situation where the House is once again effective, where you are going to be able to have legislation that gets put forward from the floor without necessarily having to wait for Nancy Pelosi's stamp of approval, which was the thing for the longest time. Our parliament right now in this country is dysfunctional at exactly the same level. You can't have a situation where, unless you have the approval of the speaker, and then the speaker is not giving approval unless the ANC has agreed on it behind the scenes, where parliament is actually able to function. So I don't think it's not actually personal. It is all about the ability to make use of the House quite effectively. One of the, it was a representative from Oklahoma who yesterday was tabling the rules under which the House is going to be operating going forward. And he was pointing out in particular the passing of that 1.7 trillion bill in the dying days. Yes,
and the
omnibus bill.
The fact that one of these things, for me, I mean, I've got to agree with Kanthan here. One of the things is that people actually have to read. They need time to be able to read these bills that are being passed, because
4,700 pages in that case.
Yeah, and it was just put through, and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats just pushed it through in the dying days of their majority. It's that and all these other concessions which they gained. One of them being that the IRS isn't going to get a huge tranche of funding, which frankly will just make the ordinary American more of a victim of the revenue service than anything else. And all of this stuff has now been put to a stop thanks to what seems to be a very fragile but nonetheless important maneuver by these conservative Republicans who really pushed Kevin McCarthy into a corner. This is important politics. This is what parliaments are for, is the negotiation, a to and fro. So while it's embarrassing to some, I think many people are looking at this and saying, well, that's what legislatures are meant to be doing.
But then it's a reach to then say, I'm sorry, Pumi, but I think it's a reach to then say, by virtue of doing that, you're going to make the processes easier, right? Just then say it's a self-serving purpose, right? Because that's what it then goes to the core of politics. It's about the self and the ego and the hubris of the individual, and then the hubris of the collective, right? So if you're then going to stop one bill from this side to that side, because remember, a hallmark of the American political system is to hide things in largely worded papers. That's part of their system, is to hide little nuggets in
behind the scenes.
And so at the end of the day, if you were trying to make the American system more effective, this maneuver is not it. It's going to make the Republicans look good, yes. It's going to make them look like they're working, yes. It's a cosmetic sort of application of what is supposed to be a working Senate. And so we must be truthful about it. A working Senate doesn't look like what's happening now, or even what's going to happen in the next 6 months. A working Senate does not look like that. So we must always go back to the hubris of the individual. If I now tell you I'm going into politics, know that I've now considered myself the master of Velcom, and I think I know everything about this place, and I'm going to make everyone better. That's the first part. And then the collective, me and my friends who believe like me, I am going to be the savior of Velcom. And so you must always take it to that basis first before you think it's about to work for the people.
And the thing about it for me, so there are two things about it for me. One is the theatrics of it, is what creates for the public, right? Is I'm actually not going to be any more interested in all of this, and this is where the opportunity to hide things comes from, and on both sides. So Nancy was able to create a system which worked for her way of pushing things through, because that's what they want to do. That's what the Republicans want to do. That's what the Democrats want to do. And what works for Nancy is having to be able to, and hence the vote counter, right, is to whip the votes behind the scenes so that by the time they get into that voting stance, she knows exactly who's voting for what, because she's worked them.
Let's go back to what we said last year. And I'm telling you once again, this is not about business as usual politics along those lines. This is a fight for the soul of America that is happening right now. The battle between the Trump Republicans and the rhinos is the most crucial thing that's happening. And a very likely outcome is going to be that you actually have a split in the Republican Party that actually happens on the eve of the elections for the next presidential elections. And that will be the best thing that could actually happen to the U.S. In exactly the same way as, in the same way that I said that the best thing that could happen in our country is for a split to happen within the ANC. And but I see that as a distant dream at the moment. Gareth, you have had a thought on that, I can see.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to throw more thought into U.S. politics for the moment, because I think we've yet to see whether this House is effective at all. But I do think that your quite dire prediction of the Republican Party splitting is a really interesting one. I think that there's an ideological divide growing in America over everything. Everything's so political, right? Everyone I know in America, everything from art to sport to Prince Harry and Meghan, for God's sake, everything's political now. And you immediately know that you are friends or enemies with someone depending on whether or not you wear a mask, depending on whether or not you support pro-life or pro-choice arguments. And all of this has now been conflated into this very complicated and hugely sensitive political system where Americans are actually looking at each other as being their prime source of ire. They're not looking at the Ukraine and Russia. Most Americans couldn't care less about Ukraine and Russia. They are actually looking for the enemy within. And Republicans see Democrats as enemies. Democrats see Republicans as enemies, and vice versa. And it's not going to get better for a while, with people like Trump stoking the fires on one side and many of the Democrats doing the same on the other side. It's getting worse. It's making America a very uncomfortable place for most people to just try and get along, as Jack Nicholson said in Mars Attacks. So I don't want to spend too much more time on that if you guys don't mind. We've only got a few minutes, and Leeto's got some interesting observations, which I think will give us pause for thought before we head into the new year. And I think, Leeto, we've got this young population of people who are desperate and hungry and are hustling and have to. And, just because so many young people in this country are unemployed doesn't mean they're sitting on their hands, right?
No, it doesn't. They're hustling every day. They're trying to make a way for themselves. But for the most part, the systems around them aren't allowing them to maximize that. And if you look at all the other countries around us, look at the BRICS countries, for instance. If you look at China, one of its powers that it was able to leverage is population. And that population dynamic is turning to trash, right? Because of that one child policy that failed so dismally. And so if we are then going to be the youngest continent on the planet, how are we using that in our future? So how are we building the blocks for what our young people could be tomorrow. And it doesn't seem like any of our leadership is doing that. Like, not even just in South Africa, all across Africa. They don't know what to do with these young people. If you talk about Nigeria, for instance, you're talking about the election. Like in Nigeria, only like less than 10% of the population actually votes for the political leadership. And so if you think about that, you're like, wait, where's everyone else? You then get to consider that everyone else is actually young people, and they're saying, well, we don't really care about that system. It doesn't work for us. And so the fact that we're not thinking about these young people is what is scary to me, is that they are a commodity that we're not using to its maximum, right? Even if we use them as like a hard work labor, let's use them as part of the potential to solve some of our problems. Let's just like thrust all of them into the police force, into the SANDF. Let's use them as something, but we're not using them as something. You get to, so I actually went to Botshabelo, which is a town smaller than Welkom, and you get there and almost, almost all the youth doesn't work. No one works. And so you get there and you're like, wait, what is this town going to become in 10 years? If nobody's working, that means nobody in that town has a bank account. It means nobody in that town is eligible for anything that the system provides as a comfort. So you're not even going to get credit. You're not. So they're working outside of the system. And if there are towns like that littered all across the Free State, which is essentially a failed province, right? The rot in South Africa and the failure to govern is going to start from the Free State and sort of radiate outward. And so what I'm seeing here, I know for a fact I'm going to start to see in the rest of South Africa in 6-7 months or a year, 2 years. So whatever is happening in the Free State now, the huge potholes are starting to manifest in Johannesburg. The lack of collection of waste, it started here. That's a fashion that started here too. When you're cutting down and you're stealing the money, steal the money from the garbage trucks first. And so that sort of breakdown in systems and how they work seems to be permeating, and it's now radiating outside of the Free State into places like Lesotho. And I'm very, very scared about our future in those terms.
So, I mean, your words are ringing in my ears, and I can only think of what the only person who was on our show last year who had any solution to this question was Muzi Kozwayo, who in his book South Africa's Promise has basically come up with a plan to get young people to do essentially what would be a year of paid, but not paid extravagantly, community service effectively, and a chance for them to contribute to the country. It's like taking Mandela Day and stretching it over a year. And I think that's probably one of the best ideas I've heard. I haven't heard any other ideas that come even close to addressing this problem. I mean, Kanthan, you've got some, no doubt, and Pumi, you've got a couple too.
Yeah, the thing that that Muzi touched upon was actually something that went back to the Mandela era. And remember that originally what was supposed to be happening was you were supposed to have this effective youth subsidy in terms of getting them into the workplace. And most of us have forgotten the reason why the project was killed, but it was killed because of COSATU. Because COSATU then saw it as a threat to their unionized base. Because you see, if you effectively have subsidized workers being brought in, then that allows you to slowly start whittling away at the relatively underworked and overpaid COSATU members that exist primarily in the public service. And so that's the reason why that idea died away. So, Leeto, there's no shortage of good ideas. But in the absence of will on the part of the state to actually implement it, we're not going to be able to get anywhere with it.
Guys, the president has got a whole Yes for Youth program. Why are you ignoring Why are you ignoring the presidential... Listen, you are ignoring the presidential job summit. You are ignoring the presidential... Like, come on, guys. There are many commissions out here that the president... It's good ideas that the president has put out there, and you people just choose to ignore it. The only people that really notice the good work that the president is doing is mainstream media. Because you guys just willfully want to look away from this.
Is the NYDA still a thing, by the way? Is anybody
aware? Yes.
For the new board and everything. they've got a new board and everything. They have a whole new set of people who are there, who are
And
all
new
earning
offices in
great.
Johannesburg. Brand new offices in Johannesburg.
You people are just willfully looking away from the good work that is being done. There's a good story to
No.
be
So
told.
here's the other
There's a good story to
thing.
be told, and you people are not telling the story.
For me, you've reached your
The
quota.
youth-
For me, you reached your quota for sarcasm in one show, and one, that's enough. Please, you're going to kill us all.
The Youth Employment Service, by the way, I signed up for it, signed up all my friends for it, right? None of us, and the young people in my neighborhood, I was like, okay, we're going to use my data. It's fine. I'm going to pay for it. Let's go.
Right.
Sign everyone up. Nobody has gotten an SMS ever since we did that. SMS to say, oh no, we recognize you signed up. Did not we're getting you a job. They didn't say we see you signed up for the program. So yes, Youth Employment Service. Yes. Thank you, Pumi.
That's outrageous. I mean, they're
Look,
getting a
There's
lot
a
of money.
year ahead. I'm like Kanthan, am very much looking forward to a cabinet reshuffle. I'll be very pleased to see it happen. I don't know. I mean, I know the president penned it in his letter saying that it is imminent, this cabinet reshuffle, but I wait with bated breath. I also wait this
By
year.
the-
Another thing the president has promised us is that he will be dealing with urgency with
Yeah.
the whole lot of the issues, the power issues that we are facing. He'll be dealing with those. That in this term of his presidency, issues are going to be dealt with a whole lot more urgency. And I, for one, look forward to this year of seeing lots of things happening.
Also, thank you, Gareth, for having Kanthan here. Kanthan, me and you are gonna test the might of the NYTA. We're gonna come up with a nice business plan and see which ANC member gets it and implement it. We're gonna hand in a proposal to NYTA and see whether or not they give us the funds or they give it off to the
Done
next
deal.
guy.
Let's do that.
I have the idea. This is a great project for the Burning Platform for 2023.
Yes. So
Guys, I said we've reached our quota for sarcasm. We've got to try to find
It's not sarcastic. Although I did start the show today, so this is what my outside of my sarcasm quota. I did start the show this morning talking about how I absolutely refuse to let them steal my joy. And the one thing, if anybody remembers any one thing for the rest of this year with the Burning Platform, is that we have to be absolutely intentional, all of us, about not sitting back and becoming complacent. This is important. Report the potholes, report the broken street lights, be there, right? Be there and be active. Don't sit back and go, what can I do? Right? This is where you actually have to stand up. This is still our country, and it is important for all of us to participate in making sure that we don't let them steal our joy and we don't let them steal our voice, because this is what it is. Don't let them steal the voice. So remain angry. Remain angry. That's
don't
what's
let the
good. Don't let
bastards
the
get you
fuckers
down.
Get you down.
Garrett, someone was asking a question in the comments in terms of why we're not manufacturing our own solar panels in this country. A couple of the things I just want to touch on that. The one is that we actually had patents that were developed at WITS that are really best in the world in terms of efficiency around solar panels. The reason why we're not able to actually end up manufacturing those out here is basically because, again, we lack the will to actually fund the establishing of enough of an industrial base to actually produce those panels. And of course, we need electricity to actually run those factories, which is not going to happen in a short space of time. So as usual, the technology will end up getting sold off to the Chinese, exactly like our pebble bed modular reactors did. Yes, and they'll sell it back to us in manufactured form, which is unfortunate, but yes, that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. And finally from me, Garrett. I think also this is the last time you guys see me with dreadlocks. I'm going to cut them off. So
are they going?
Yes, they're going. It's been almost 15 years, so
oh wow.
Um,
It's time for a change.
yes, but also like don't just like Pumi and Kanthan. I mean, we're always happy as South Africans, and but also we're also good in our discomfort. So don't lend yourself to comfort as a South African because you are individually comfortable. South Africans are always best when we huddle together and work towards something. Whenever we are shoulder to shoulder South Africans, we are a scary force. So from here on outward, remember that Cyril Ramaphosa only has 18 months left. 18 months is nothing. 2024, get you, your family members, everyone out there voting. Vote for anyone else except these damn bastards. Because at the end of the day, we have to change this country. We have to find a new configuration of how we become better. And it's going to take work. It's not going to, we're not going to find a silver bullet in the DA or EFF or Freedom Front Plus. It's going to be a combination of those, just like I'm saying, that us together are the solution. They're not going to be the solution by themselves just because they have that hubris and they think they're better than the rest of us. So keep going, keep grinding, make a change in your circle. We're going to become better. We're going to change this thing.
I like it. A little inspiration for the end here. I've just got to say that what Leeto just said about us standing shoulder to shoulder and not being individually comfortable and thinking that will push us through. I saw some Americans who I've known for a while, and they were out here just the other day, and they said to me, give us in a short précis kind of what the story of South Africa politically at the moment is. And instead of going into the party breakdown, I thought, no, let me look at this from the point of view of the people of South Africa. And the one thing that, if nothing else good has come out of the last few years, it is that we are slowly leaving behind the very distinct lines and divisions that have so long been an issue for us. Because if black, white, old, young, rich, poor South Africans have one thing in common, it's that they hate the government. And I think that's true across the board. All South Africans finally united under one banner. We've always wondered, what is it? Is it Braai Day? Do we have, is it sport? What do we care about the most? And the thing we all care about the most is that we've been abused long enough. And everyone feels the same way about that, whether they are from this side, that age, this age, that race, this race. We're all starting to feel the same about that. And that is a very powerful thing if you can harness it, and we can all bring about change. And we've got to do it, like Pumi said at the beginning of her non-sarcastic comments just a moment ago. I like it. All right, everybody. Listen, this is a great way to start the year. I'm very pumped up after this burning platform. I hope everybody else is too. I see our own Lebang Khosana says power. So I think that's it. That's exactly what we're getting. First, let's get electricity power, and then let's restore the power dynamics in society to something where we can approximate a progression in the right direction. Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you, Leeto. Great to catch up with you, Kanthan, Pumi. We'll see you all very, very soon. That is the Burning Platform, everybody. Have a great Thursday.